Good evening, Madam President. This has certainly been an interesting, intriguing, involved, and somewhat invigorating discussion. In hearing Senator Slapp speak, I feel inspired that I might want to speak myself, and perhaps I'm going to speak until the same time, 10:42 p.m. tomorrow, because I just heard an assault on town governments and blaming towns, basically, for a slow recovery of our economy after COVID. And I'm just wondering where people have been all of this time that 830G affordable housing laws have not been working. But evidently, what I just heard and seems to very much support what I'm going to go through for what might be a very, very long time. And it seems all too easy to blame our municipalities. Oh, there's 169 of them. Yes, there are. And we should be proud of that. And I don't see any rush by the people of Connecticut to want to get rid of their municipalities. In fact, over the history of our state, some big towns split up into 2 or 3 and created new municipalities. And again, if this is the time to do something, and I'm not saying it isn't, where have people been at the table all of these decades that 830G affordable housing, a state law, has not been working? But it's easy to say things. And I'm going to speak further about various things that have been said. One thing I do want to note that has inspired me now, after hearing the comments that have just been made, is I note that this bill has 2,634 lines. I think I'm going to try to go for 2,634 questions. And let's see if I can get there. And why don't you keep count with me and see if I can achieve that? Because I'm very inspired to want to make certain that we're defending the people of Connecticut while at the same time working with the people to see what we can do to address affordability. And as we've heard and just heard, affordability isn't just housing. There's a lot of other things. And I'm going to get into that. So again, I feel inspired having heard some of those remarks, and it gives me some new information about what I'm going to look into discussing. And again, I think I will be able to achieve those 2,634 questions, given some of the stuff that we've been hearing here today, including some of the things that have been articulated by Senator Sampson with regards to issues relative to housing. One of the things I want to start out with is just to remind people, I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. How many people have served on a planning and zoning commission? Oh, I'm going to raise my hand. I don't think there are many people in this legislature, in fact, I know there aren't, and I know who they are, who have actually served on a planning and zoning commission. I was proud to chair Woodstock's Planning and Zoning Commission for 15 years. My first year I wasn't chair, but after that I was. And it's easy to talk about zoning and land use. It's easy to read academic reports. It's easy to read reports that the state of Connecticut spent $250,000 through the Office of Policy and Management at the directive of the legislature to get a report from a company out in Oregon to come all the way over here to tell us what we need to do relative to housing. And when you have real-world practical experience serving on a planning and zoning commission, working with people, walking land, dealing with planning for regulations, dealing with writing regulations. I forget how many times I've written, no lack of drafts of zoning and subdivision regulations, and in fact reworked them in a collaborative way working with people in my town. When you have to deal with the real world of administering land use regulations and the real world of adjudicating land use regulations, it gives you a very specific and unique experience. And yet I hear no lack of people who have not had that experience seem to be masters of the universe and perhaps professors. I never was a full professor when I was on medical staff at some medical schools, but seems that we do have professors who seem to know what to suddenly do now. And I dare say, and I've said this during the prior debate about fair share, which I still term as unfair share, and I still say this through many other discussions I have, how many have gone out to the various towns outside of their districts when they start blaming towns for creating housing problems and have gone out to towns? I have yet to see some of the agencies come out to some of my towns, and I've challenged them for that. But nevertheless, here we are having this debate and discussion and trying to make decisions for people of Connecticut. And when we hear people talk about, gee, certain people are looking for big government, and then churn around and blame municipal governments, and then you read this bill, which really isn't fully incentivizing. There's some actually deprioritization in here, and I'll get into that in a little bit. It's very easy to blame municipalities. And I'm going to get into why that's shameful and I think shambolic. And it serves a political special interest and doesn't get to the root causes. And when we talk about affordability, don't be fooled. We can talk about housing affordability, but affordability is far more than housing in this state. And I do not need people to tell me polls about what people are thinking. Do you know what the polls I have? I've done 13 office hours throughout my district. And I hear from people. Those are the polls that I know. And the number one issue that people tell me and continue to tell me is that this state is too unaffordable for them. Now, they can talk about housing, but these are people also who have housing, that the tax burden is too high, the regulatory environment is too high. Every single thing they do with their lives seems to be taxed. They have to pay their electric bills, and suddenly there's $10 billion worth of taxes. I guess they're called public benefit charges, but they're taxes. Every single thing is expensive in this state. And yet we think that just looking at one issue is going to take care of it. It's an important issue, but you can't look at it in isolation. And shame on the legislature for saying that if we only look at housing affordability, we can solve lots of problems. You know how Massachusetts has been doing things? Not just by looking at housing affordability, but looking at affordability in many different ways. Perhaps we can learn something from our brothers and sisters in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And yes, they're a Commonwealth. There's only two technically official Commonwealths in our United States. The other one is Kentucky. But Massachusetts is a Commonwealth. We're not, we're a state. So we can perhaps learn from things. And I can tell you in Massachusetts, because I follow what they do up there with zoning. In fact, I live 2 miles from the border in my part of the state, is they do a lot of partnering with municipalities. They don't go around bashing them, as we've just heard. They actually respect them and partner with them. And that's extremely important. And it's too easy to blame municipalities. And I'm going to get into some of the real-world limitations that various municipalities face, including small rural towns, and why we shouldn't actually be blaming them. We should be doing more to partner with them. I know this from experience, having chaired a planning and zoning commission of a small town in population. It's the second largest geographically sized town in the state, but still up in rural northeast Connecticut. And the things that we have done over the years to actually look at housing affordability in ways that the state could better partner with regards to affordability, and things this bill doesn't even get into relative to housing affordability. Now, one of the things that's extremely important to understand, and I say this a lot, is I'm not anti-housing. I actually have a municipal career showing that I've done what we can do in my town to try to promote people staying in their homes, retiring in their homes, raising families in their homes. Some of them in my town are farms, but still, they're homes for people and houses. And what we can do in a collaborative way, such as regional way, just not statewide, to do what we can do to help with housing opportunities. And I have many years of trying to do that and working on that. So some of the things I'm going to say that I think are problems, I have actually been proposing ideas. There were a lot of bills I submitted, things that I think were creative and that towns can do. Too bad the Housing Committee didn't choose to take up most of them, if nearly all of them. But I'll try again next year to see what to do. And perhaps my colleagues on the Housing Committee will want to talk with me in between sessions about some of those things that I know towns can do if they're given certain resources to be of help that they're willing to do. And when we talk about 169 municipalities, the state of Connecticut is not a monolith. You can go from one part of the state to the other. We're not a big state, and they're very, very different regions. And different towns have their own character. Yes, I'm going to use that word because it's an appropriate word. And they have many unique aspects to them. In fact, many towns and cities have different parts to them that can be different from another. And we have to take that into account when we talk about housing, different types of housing, different types of land use, things like that. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the reality of some of it is geography and topography. But it's a reality of where we are with different parts of our state. One thing that might work in one part of the state might not work in another part of the state. Again, it's not one size fits all, and it shouldn't be. But many times that seems to be the approach of state government. And as we all know, you can keep pounding a square peg into a round hole. It does not work. Eventually, you either get frustrated or tired. But we should be stopping that and looking for better ways. I don't think there are provisions in this bill that are workable. There are some I think are, but there are some that I have concerns about. And I think if some of that were to be improved or looked at differently, I think there would be a better end result. At the same time, trying to address other affordability issues, such as we have yet to have a massive debate here in the circle relative to affordability of energy costs, although I'm told that's just around the corner for us, and I look forward to that, to see what we could actually meaningfully do for people. And you talk about various state policies that have affected what we've just heard earlier here in the circle about why we seem to be slow in certain aspects of economic recovery compared to other states. Well, I think state government can look in the mirror. And these are policies that emanate from the state. But again, it seems too easy to blame the towns. They're an easy target. And that's too bad. I think that's an injustice, an inequity in and of itself. And maybe I'll submit a bill about that. But again, I support reasonable, responsible, and realistic efforts. We can all dream what we want, but we live in the real world and we have to face various realities and various limitations to see what we can actually get done. And that's what happens at municipal levels. People work together, roll up their sleeves, and see what they can do to get things done. And that's a wonderful opportunity to state to partner with. We shouldn't be doing things that could deprioritize things they need to do or somehow disincentivize or miss opportunities to partner, collaborate, and incentivize. I think there'd be great opportunities in this bill. But again, we may not have that fully in the remaining days of the session, but what a missed opportunity. And we can see what we can do in that regard. One of the other important things to keep in mind is we hear a lot about affordable housing and housing affordability. And it seems people want to interchange those two things. They actually are different things. I can tell you that, having served on a planning and zoning commission and been involved in a number of creations of affordable housing plans and planning plans of conservation and development. They are not synonymous. And that's extremely important to understand, because when we talk about affordable housing, that really gets into 830G, which has very strict criteria to it. And many times, towns can't do 830G if they don't have certain infrastructure, if they don't have certain public transportation or enough jobs. But yet, it's too easy to blame the towns for not doing affordable housing. But again, 830G isn't being looked to really be reworked or modernized, but for decades it has not been working, and we should be doing something different. And I think there are those different opportunities. But housing affordability is really what you look at. Housing affordability is much broader in its scope and in its depth. Housing affordability just doesn't get into people who may qualify with very low or low incomes, but many hardworking people who are out there who still are struggling financially, including raising kids and having a family, or caring for elder parents and trying to keep them in their homes. I like to cite the United Way ALICE data many times, because I think it shows that relative to overall affordability issues. And not just with housing. And these are people through various policies set by the state that affect them. And they may not benefit from 830G, but they might be just above the mark, and there's ways that housing affordability can be of help for them. And that's stuff that towns do look at. We do have affordable housing plans. I've always referred to my towns as housing affordability plans. And again, there's a big distinction in those terms. I don't see when we have these debates that people are making that distinction, and that gets into missed opportunities. And that gets into, when you talk about overall housing affordability, that part of housing affordability is how much money gets taken out from people's paychecks, from the overall very high cost of living, that then they don't have enough money to deal with issues of housing or even rent. That gets into housing affordability. And that's extremely important to keep in mind. And so when we talk about something like this bill, and we're really not getting into full or true affordability issues, and we look at these things in silos or at different times via different bills, that's a concern and that's a problem. And I think some of the aspects of this bill miss the mark in that regard, but I think could be redirected. But we seem to not have many more days left of the session, and that's a shame. And again, we'll see what happens relative to this, but as my good colleague Senator Sampson talked about, I don't think you're going to see this bill is going to be the panacea. I think there are other things we could be doing in addition, perhaps, or changing it to see what better to do and what more to do. And we should not fool ourselves to think that suddenly passing this, taking pictures on the screen if this were to pass, going to signing of a bill, having a press conference and photo ops is going to somehow translate down at the grassroots level where people live and work and raise their families, and then hopefully retire and enjoy themselves, that this is suddenly going to make a big difference. And I'm going to get into some of that as well. One of the things that's important to understand is about zoning. Many times I hear people talk about housing and land use. I don't think they actually fully understand zoning. Now, some of that is because they just don't have the direct experience having dealt with it on a planning and zoning commission there at a municipal level. Some of it is they may not have gone out to various types of towns and communities to understand different things. There's a difference between a rural town and a suburb town and a city. But zoning has been made to be some type of monster that it actually fully isn't. And we hear all sorts of terms. And some of them seem to get bandied about in unfortunate ways. And they make good political quotes and statements. And then you can say whatever you say and leave the chamber and do whatever, or people can say this in their towns or wherever else in the papers and the media. But zoning in and of itself is not bad. Zoning is a tool, and it serves a good purpose. But you have to be mindful of the community that it's used in. And zoning is managed by people in their own towns. And one of the things that is a truism, no matter how much some people may think otherwise, but indeed a truism, that we have a proud history of defending in this state, is that the people of Connecticut know best what is best for the communities in which they live. The people of Connecticut know best what is best for the communities in which they live. Isn't that true? So if there's somebody who lives out, let's say, in Danbury, they may know their community well. They vote in town budgets. They can go to town meetings and whatever, attend school boards and have their voice heard, versus someone out, let's say, in Norwich. Different community, different part of the state. Someone in Danbury may very well not know much about what really goes on in Norwich and vice versa. But the people in each community do. And they elect their local officials to represent them, to work with them, to get things done, to have their voices heard. And that's how things happen at the town level, in deciding what works. So do we really think that state government, by enacting laws and setting up various bureaucracies, perhaps people who don't even know where some of these towns are and have to look them up on a map to know where they are, let alone go out and visit in person and see what's going on and talk with people who are making decisions at the local level, really would know better than people who are living in those actual communities or working in those communities? That's a scary thought. And we hear earlier tonight about big government. That's scary with regards to that actually would be big government if the state thinks it knows better than people in their own communities about their own communities. So again, it's easy to blame the towns. They're an easy target. But it's a wrong thing to do. What an injustice and inequity that is. And a missed opportunity to partner with people who, quite frankly, want to seek ways to partner and collaborate and are asking for more help from the state. I don't believe they're asking for all of this. In fact, I've been hearing concerns from people in my towns, regardless of their political party affiliations, who have raised consistent concerns to me as their elected state senator. And I talk with them in their towns, and I listen and see what we can do to be of help. So we do have to keep that in mind, and I'm going to get into that and weave that throughout my comments, and may well through, I think I have 40-something amendments, and may well get through that. And again, I'm still, we'll try to get to those 2,634 questions that I mentioned. I'm going to try to get to. So I'll be weaving some of that in and out. One of the other things that I think is extremely important to be keeping in mind when we look at a bill, not just this, but any bill that's dealing with land use, is that zoning was originally created to deal with addressing concerns that were being raised by really profound growth in our country in the late 1800s, heading into the early 1900s. I don't know how many people have actually read the history of zoning. I challenge you too. You actually will learn quite a bit and perhaps craft better bills if you do. In fact, read about Euclidean zoning, one of the hallmarks of zoning. still used in various degrees by many towns in Connecticut. There are other forms of zoning, but Euclidean zoning is one of the more commonly known ones, and I think you'll learn quite a bit when people wanted to create better places to live for themselves, especially as a lot more commerce and industry, especially industry, was really growing in this country. And that was a time of rapid growth. And not only the federal government was having to deal with it, but states and towns and cities were. And what ended up happening was, if you want to talk about good ways that government can partner, that it was actually the federal government during President Harding's time in office, a Republican president, and a Commerce Secretary who happened to have the name of Herbert Hoover. People forget he was a Commerce Secretary. He did many other things. He helped with major food drives and things like that after the aftermath of World War I. And people forget that he did that. He also set up various mining companies, including a very successful one in Australia. And that's a fascinating history and read about the man. But we just remember him as a president. But he actually was a very active Commerce Secretary. And he set up looking into various enabling acts where, through the federal government partnering with states to give a framework to better allow cities and towns to set up zoning. That's where Connecticut ended up developing its land use enabling acts, some of which are in 8-2 statutes. And then cities and towns had more, I wouldn't say capability, but there was more legal framework for them to start setting things up. And I wonder how many people who create bills relative to zoning and housing that has to emanate from zoning have actually read the 8-2 general statutes. If you would like to, I'll give you a copy. But I don't think many people have. Because I hear all sorts of things talked about zoning that seem to be contradictory sometimes to the actual statutes that we have and the underpinning principles of land use planning and development. And I have concerns about this bill that it doesn't fully look into some of those underlying principles. And if you read many different municipal zoning and subdivision regulations, if you would like to read the ones from my towns, they're right here. Feel free. They're very interesting readings. And you'll read in the preambles and introductory sections citing 8-2 authority and some other statutes, and citing some of the common principles that we look into that are extremely important, and that I look into bills like this, like public health, public welfare, public safety. These may sound abstract, but they're really nitty-gritty fine details that have huge impacts at a local level. Width of streets, that has a huge impact. Why? Not because you want two cars to pass by going in opposite directions, because what about fire trucks and ambulances if there's parked cars? Those are real-world issues. I have lost track of how many times I've had meetings with fire department chiefs about these various things and actually having to think about that type of stuff. That's real-world issues. Parking, things like that, extremely important. And parking in one place in Connecticut community may be very different than, say, in a rural part of the state. Again, these are important issues to think about, and I don't think when one looks at legislation like this that fully takes it into account. And that's a concern to me. The other is, when we think about land and land use, it has a very prime place in people's lives. For most people, it actually isn't just their prized possession on which the house may sit. It's actually their major asset that they would rely upon. And that's extremely important. And in fact, you can go way back into colonial times here in Connecticut and see various laws about land use and protecting land ownership and land taking. And some of that, of course, we were British colonies back in the time. But if you go back in Britain to see some of the earliest types of land laws, you can go back to the Magna Carta, 1215. And look at those documents, and you can see about land and getting into who owned land, protecting that ownership, who could then develop their land, as opposed to some noble or the king making the decision. Very, very important. And when you then move forward to now, with that understanding, you can better understand issues about zoning and why towns in each 169 municipalities do attend to these things, and why people in their towns want to keep their towns and take pride in their towns, as they should, and make decisions working with others in their towns for what might work best at any given time where they live in their communities. And that's extremely important. And if you would like a copy of the Magna Carta, I do have a copy in my office. I'm happy to give it to you, a printout, and you can actually read some of those sections. And that's extremely important as well. No, I don't have the original one. No. With that said, when we talk about land use, we also have to think about limitations. Now, it's easy to look on a map and have some consultant from somewhere and decide how much we need for housing. And I agree we do need housing. I just think there's better ways to try to achieve it. And I have a number of bills I submitted. Again, I challenged the Housing Committee to tell me why they decided not to really move forward with those. But that I'll wait for a conversation for another time. Although, since I have to evidently try to get to 2,634 questions, I might actually ask some of that to try to get there. And one of the things that we understand about limitations of land use isn't just geography and topography. That's extremely important. You don't want to be necessarily building in a part of a land where there's watercourses, waterways, inland wetlands, especially in towns that have wells and you want to preserve the water supply, of course. That's why some towns have overlay aquifer protection zones, which is extremely important to do, and deal with all sorts of waste management rules. When we heard someone say about, well, you know, some towns have like a 1 acre minimum, sometimes that is not bad. And why is that? Because sometimes you actually have to have certain amount of contiguous land if you're going to want to think about having a septic system and a well. How you're going to space them apart on your property and your neighbors. These are things that actually get looked at when you make land use decisions. And sometimes it's complicated. And then you got to factor in DPH various rules. I'm not saying they're bad, relative to things like wastewater and all sorts of things to uphold public health, one of the fundamental principles of land use zoning. But also we have to factor in as well surrounding properties, such as agriculture. In fact, in 8-2 state statute, it talks about wanting to make certain that we can attend to agricultural lands. Because what happens on one property can have potentially bad effects on another if you don't think carefully. And that's why towns also think about what do they do with regulations pertaining to multifamily. And sometimes they have to be different because of higher density relative to what they may or may not have for public water, public sewer. Those are real issues. And you just can't necessarily have some sorts of academics from Oregon come in, get paid $250,000, come up with all sorts of things about how many additional affordable housing homes different towns have to do, and not at all have any real-world understanding in those towns how you're going to do it. Maybe a town might, but maybe some towns cannot because of various issues that they have to attend to in real-world issues. That's not their fault when you're upholding public safety, public welfare, and public health. Important underpinning principles that planning and zoning commissions attend to. I know that from personal experience. I'm dealing with, I've lost track of how many land use applications I had to make decisions upon. And those three always would underpin decisions making. But also we have to be mindful that if we're going to tag municipalities, and there are fair share provisions in this bill, I refer to them as unfair share because it's unfair to just assign numbers to towns and not have any realistic way of trying to help the towns achieve those numbers. But yet, at some point, you're going to, again, make them an easy target. And we've already seen that tonight, that it's all too easy to make towns an easy target. That's shameful, unfortunately. One of the things we have to be mindful of is that if you're going to ask municipalities to find additional ways to up housing, help provide them resources that they need. I have some bills that I submitted. In fact, my good colleague, Senator Lamont, I thanked him previously, and I'm thanking him again here tonight for working in a collaborative, bipartisan way to see what we can do to get more money in a regional way for planning. That's helpful. That's something towns can benefit from. They can benefit from various engineering resources. They can benefit from various planning resources. They can benefit from more infrastructure. That's important. If we're going to want to talk about building more houses, you're going to need the infrastructure. Who's going to build that? Who's going to maintain that? That's extremely important things. Those are things that when you do a town build-out analysis, and I have done many of those in my town, you actually think about that. You just don't think about putting dots on your town about new housing. You also have to draw lines of different colors. And some of the colors are for roads. Some of the colors are for, are you going to have to do any type of sewer? Are you going to have to do any type of water? What do you do if you're not going to have new sewers? How are you going to handle all the waste in septic systems and all the wells and things like that? Extremely mindful. It's extremely important type stuff. And if none of you have been at build-out analysis meetings, and there can be very long meetings, but they're very fascinating, all of these things get looked into, the nuts and bolts of housing and where housing development is, whether it's a single family, if that's what someone wants, on 1 acre, a single family, say, at a lake, like in one of my towns where they might have like a quarter of an acre or less, or if somebody wants to buy a farm and keep it open and they have 100 acres and let it continue to be hayed and be a cornfield, but they get to enjoy, if that's what they want. Or if someone wants to go into a duplex or multifamily housing. All those nuts and bolts have to be looked at, and all of the limitations have to be looked at. I can tell you when I helped write the last affordable housing plan in my town, we purposely put a section in to identify here are the limitations we face, so we can try to find opportunities to deal with those limitations to provide better opportunity for people for housing, whatever the housing they may want. I was never there to tell people this is the type of housing you should get. In fact, I helped rewrite our subdivision regulations, it's in here somewhere, to actually give people multiple opportunities. But at the same time, when we hear people chastise towns for standing in the way with their regulation, I don't think those people have actually attended a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and met with commissioners who have to plan with the regulations. That's planning, that's one hat you wear. And then administer and adjudicate regulations. That's the zoning hat that you wear. They're two different things, but most of the time they're combined. I can tell you many towns do find ways to streamline processes. I did that in my town. We streamlined things tremendously. And do you know what stood in the way most of the time of streamlining? And I didn't hear that in comments by some people tonight. Do you know what stood in the way of trying to streamline as much as we could processes to help people get permits to build housing in as cost-effective a way as they could, in as a timely manner as they could? The state of Connecticut, with its no lack of rules and regulations. So if we want to talk about empowering permitting processes, look at the state of Connecticut and let's see what we can do. I would love to be able to do that, because I can tell you that many things that frustrated me in administering land use applications at a local level were not regulations we put in. In fact, we purposely put in a lot that just said, you may submit something if we feel it's applicable, but if it's not applicable, don't submit it. We're not going to require it. But a lot of stuff we had to get, some of which was unnecessary for us to make decisions, was because of laws, rules, and regulations by the state of Connecticut. So let's not blame the towns. Let's see what we can do at the state level. This bill doesn't get to that. But that would be something we can do that would be extremely important. And I hope that we can do that and we can see what to do. Some of the other things that, before I start getting into certain other more specific stuff relative to this bill, and I do have to at some point tonight or actually tomorrow morning get into some amendments, is it is a false argument to say because there is zoning and because we have housing issues to various degrees in different parts of the state, that it's the zoning that's creating the problems, and the towns that administer the zoning, they're creating the problems. That's actually a false argument. That's not a correct argument at all. That's a post hoc ergo propter hoc argument, which we know is actually a fallacy argument. That's well known, where basically it just says after this because of this. The zoning in and of itself does not create the housing problem or the housing shortage. And many towns try to find ways to deal with housing affordability. And it's not the zoning. They're not purposely doing it. We hear about issues, we've heard actually here tonight about segregation. We hear about discrimination. We have federal and state laws about that, and rightly so. And if there are communities in this state or in this country that do discriminate on purpose through their zoning regulations, then yes, we have federal and state laws to attend to that. And those laws should be enforced. And in fact, we know they do get enforced. But zoning otherwise, by honest, hardworking people who live in their own communities, is not the boogeyman it's being made out to be. That's a false argument. It's easy to serve certain political and special interests. And we certainly see no lack of emails and other things we're getting from some of those interests because it serves their purpose. And again, towns are an easy target. Why spend the extra time and put in the hard work partnering and working with towns when you can just bash them and then get otherwise what you're trying to get at? And if it doesn't work, just blame the towns. That's too convenient. But as we know, trying to seek what we hear about seeking change, and I agree to certain regards, requires hard work. And for some people, that's inconvenient. It's just a lot easier to pass laws and then see what to do. If we're going to pass laws, then we should actually be putting in the hard work out there in the field with the folks who are doing the work at the municipal level and be partnering with them and meeting with them and seeing what to do to get done. I can tell you when I served on Planning and Zoning Commission for 16 years, some of the best opportunities we had when folks were reaching out to us and asking, what can we do to work with you and be of help? Some of those were neighboring towns. Some of those were people in other parts of the state who said, hey, by the way, we have something that works. We just want to let you know about it because it might work for you. That's very, very helpful. So again, I'm concerned that there's some missed opportunities that we have here. One of the issues that I have a concern about in this bill, and I'm trying to find the section number here, I believe it's in section 5. Let me just find it here. And it gets into making changes with regards to when people want to have protests against proposed changes, especially relative to zoning changes. Well, it's not that difficult to petition local government. I can tell you in my town, people would just come to the Planning and Zoning Commission and tell us what they think. They would say, do you know, you're thinking of making this change and we do not like it. And they're in this bill, it's seeking to make a change. And I think in a way to try to make it more difficult for people to want to make changes that otherwise might have to be enacted. And I don't think that is right. And one of the things that I'll get into with an amendment is to not make a change in this Section 5. I don't believe it's actually going to fix a problem because there is no problem. And this will be a First Amendment I bring out, and I'm kind of mindful of a statement, if any of you watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Uncle Phil. Wonderful character. Unfortunately, the actor passed away. But to kickstart off, one of the famous statements he said is, Jeffrey, break out Lucille. So I'll do that and break out a First Amendment here. And I'm just going to make certain I find the right one so I can make certain I can give the right number here. So, Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9845. And I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9845, Senate Amendment A.
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and seek leave, if I may, to summarize, please.
Please do summarize, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. Strike Section 5. I don't think we should be making it more difficult for people to want to petition for any changes. This is something that actually works well. People don't always have to make a formal petition. Again, they can go to their planning and zoning commissions, their town governments, who listen to them and see what to do. I think this is part of an effort to make things more difficult for people to make changes, and I don't think that's right. And I think it emanates from some of that we've seen when there were discussions about fair share, about some articles that came out from folks at Yale Law School. It went out into the Fordham Law Review, I think in 2021, saying that, for lack of a better term, just having volunteer people from their towns be elected to planning and zoning commissions, that they may not be educated enough to be making these decisions, and having too much public input can slow things down, when in fact having public input is extremely important, and that's how you actually make informed decisions here in the legislature and here and also at the municipal level. So I believe that this is a very straightforward section to keep the law as it is because it's working, and not make things more difficult for people in their towns. And so I think this is an important amendment to continue to keep people involved and give people opportunities to seek change, even if they want to seek change and go to their planning and zoning commission and say, do you know, you want to do X, Y, and Z, but we feel in order to have better opportunities for affordable housing in our town, you should do A, B, and C, and we want you to change what you're doing. Why raise the bar on that? There's a process that works. It works well. I don't see there's any need to change it, and it will do nothing if you change it to help towns deal with trying to provide more opportunities for affordable housing. So I urge adoption of the amendment, and Madam President, when there's a vote, I ask, please, that it be by a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark on the amendment, Senator Rahman?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to oppose this amendment. This amendment undermines the entire Section 5, also undermines the entire bill. Thank you. And I will also asking my colleagues not to support this amendment.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, a roll call vote has been requested. I will open the vote. Mr. Clerk.
Immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment A. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment A of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment A. This is a vote on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment A of House Bill number 5002. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment A of House Bill number 5002. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate on Senate Amendment A of House Bill number 5002.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, would you give us the tally on the amendment?
Senate Amendment A of House Bill 5002. Total number voting 35. Total voting yea 11. Total voting nay 24. Absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further, Senator Gordon?
Madam President, thank you. I'm not surprised, certainly disappointed, in that regard. But, what can you do? All you can do is continue to provide reasoning and hope that at some point in time people want to take that opportunity. But moving on, one of the very concerning parts of this bill is that it seeks to prioritize certain municipalities that sign up to have a transit-oriented district. And despite whatever the proponents of the bill say, whenever I and others mention that when you prioritize one municipality or group of municipalities that chooses to opt into this, that a municipality that chooses not to or cannot do it through no fault of their own automatically will be deprioritized. And I've seen all sorts of verbal gymnastics presented to me to try to say that it isn't deprioritization of various state discretionary grants. And it's been certainly interesting to see that. But I think the more of those verbal gymnastics I've seen, the more it shows that they're trying to really get away from that. Yes, you're going to prioritize some towns to get certain discretionary grants, such as clean water funds, such as steep grants, and then say a small rural town that has no public transit, no public water, no public sewer, doesn't even have a transit-oriented district, doesn't have the resources to even create a transit-oriented district, will basically be deprioritized. And my good colleague, Representative Doug Dubitsky, who, like me, has served and still serves on a planning and zoning commission, he's also a constituent of mine in Chaplin, one of my small towns, rightly says when you prioritize one town, you automatically are deprioritizing another. That's just how it works in the real world, no matter what you may say. That's a fact. We should not be deprioritizing towns, especially towns of no fault of their own, that the state isn't doing the full that it should do to partner with them, and then say, well, you'll be put lower on the list because by default, another town's going to leapfrog ahead of you for something like steep grants that our towns rely upon. Actually, I believe all of us represent towns that to some degree would rely upon and look into things like clean water and things like steep grants. And that, I believe, it should not be. We should actually be perhaps providing more money if we're going to incentivize certain municipalities to create transit-oriented districts and not take money away from a big pool for, let's say, steep grants for those that can't be deprioritized. That's a big problem in this bill. That's trying to pick winners and losers, and it's also a huge missed opportunity to tell a municipality, well, you'll be deprioritized, but we're really not going to do as much as we should to be of help to you, to help you with infrastructure, so that maybe you could be in a position you want to opt in for a transit-oriented district. I've had some bills in that regard, and we've heard some debate in the House about wanting to get more bonding for steep grants. But there's various other ways to do that and not deprioritize. And that is terrible to do that to municipalities. In fact, I've heard from all my municipalities, regardless of political party affiliation by town leaders, who do not want to see themselves deprioritized. And that is a huge issue in this bill. I can tell you that we did fight against that in the Planning and Development Committee, but my Democratic colleagues continued to vote down those amendments made in a constructive, collaborative way to try to see what we can do to better help with regards to not having that type of deprioritization. But still, we have that in this bill. And that is a concern, and that is a problem, and we should not be having that. That gets into a whole bunch of stuff that's actually in Section 6, where we start getting into discretionary infrastructure funding, and then, quote unquote, trying to develop realistic opportunities for various types of housing. But if you don't have, in reality, the tools you need as a municipality to create that, you're going to in a sense, be deprioritized because you can't create a transit-oriented district. And it gets into a lot of discussion about discretionary grants that, again, are picking winners and losers. If I may, through you, Madam President, ask a question of the proponent of the bill. I don't know if it's Senator Marks. I've been told by the majority leader before it was you. I don't know who's fielding the question.
She is.
So then to the proponent of the bill, if I may. On line 290, in section C, where it talks about discretionary infrastructure funding, what is the discretionary funding that Connecticut General Statute 4-66C refers to?
Senator Marks.
Through you, what section of the bill is this on, to the good senator?
Senator
I know
Gordon.
what section is it?
Through you, Madam President, it's line 290.
Thank you, Senator Marks.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, I was asking for the section so I know if it's a P&D bill or if it's a housing bill.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. That's why I wasn't certain who I was supposed to ask the question to, but it is in section 6.
Thank you, Senator Marks.
Okay. Now I have to find it. All right. Thank you, Madam President. What line is it again, up to the good senator? Oh.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you. For the third time, it's line 290.
I could ask for the fourth time.
Please do. I'm happy to field the question.
It's been a long day. Senator Marks.
Oh, yeah. Okay, through you, Madam
Yes.
President. Those are the grants to help with the infrastructure for the towns that's put in their affordable housing plan. So it would be like the STEEP grant or the Clean Water grant. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. My question was very specific, and I'll ask it again to the good senator. In Section 6, line 290, my question was, what actually is Connecticut General Statute? It says Section 4-66C. What does that specifically refer to?
Thank you, Senator Marks.
Through you, Madam President. I don't know.
Senator Gordon.
Well, Madam President, thank you. I actually did spend time studying through this bill, and I certainly do know what it is. And it actually, when you're talking about 4-66C, that gets into actually urban action bonds that some of our municipalities rely upon. It's in here. It's important to know for everybody that that's one of the discretionary grants that a municipality could be deprioritized. If it chooses not to participate in or create a transit-oriented district or has no realistic way to do so because it doesn't have the ability, the infrastructure, let alone even any public transit that could qualify via this bill. I don't think various municipalities are happy. I've heard from many of them. We've heard from CCM and we've heard from Cost through planning and development committee meetings. There's testimony in the system. Again, I've studied the bill and I've looked into that testimony. They don't like trying to be deprioritized. And so that is certainly a major concern and a major issue, trying to pick winners and losers relative to urban action bonds. I don't think that's right to do. I really wouldn't want to see that with regards to any municipality, whether it's in my Senate district or anyone else's Senate district. I don't think that's right. So I'm just going to find the right number here. Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCL number 9866. I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9866, Senate Amendment B.
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and I seek leave, please, to summarize.
Please do summarize, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I've already spoken relative to why we should have this amendment. Why would we want to penalize a municipality and the people who live in that municipality, and that could be any in our districts that we represent, because they choose not to participate, but especially if they don't have the infrastructure in place or even public transit for them to create a transit-oriented district. They shouldn't be deprioritized because urban action bonds do serve good purposes. And various of our towns have and may want to in the future seek those state discretionary grant opportunities that can be quite helpful for the people and the businesses in those towns. So I urge adoption of this amendment. I think it's a good amendment. We shouldn't be penalizing people through no fault of their own. And again, this can affect and will affect every one of our districts. And when a vote is taken, Madam President, I ask that it please be done by a roll call.
And we will have a roll call vote. Will you remark on the amendment, Senator Marks?
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, this is not penalizing any municipalities. It is prioritizing those municipalities that choose to do the new affordable housing plan and to change their zoning. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you remark on the amendment, Senator Fazio?
Thank you, Madam President. We have a lot of conversations in this building about how resources at the state level and across the state are dear. And so many of our municipalities are needing vital funds for infrastructure, for clean water, for schools, and any other number of needs, including preventing a rise in the residents' property taxes, which are already so high in this state. Funds are limited, and they're especially limited here in Connecticut. So when I hear points about, well, it's just prioritization, it's just deprioritization. Funds are limited. Resources are limited. So if you are prioritizing or deprioritizing, that means necessarily you will be taking away vital funds from some of the towns and cities who aren't bowing to the edicts of Hartford. Prioritization, deprioritization. It sounds so genteel. It sounds harmless. I think a different way I'd say it is nice state funding you got there. It would be a shame if something were to happen to it. And it's just, I think, the camel's nose under the tent. But all these sources of funding that are contemplated in the bill for prioritization or deprioritization add up to hundreds of millions of dollars of state funding for municipalities per year. Hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not a few bucks. It's not trivial, it's significant, and it could significantly make or break the budgetary situation for any number of our towns or cities who already have high property tax burdens, who are already strapped economically. Needs are unlimited, basically. So there's a certain point where you're going to have to cut off who you give the funding for. Deprioritization means you're cut off. Prioritization means that someone else is cut off. And these sections of the bill are going to necessarily harm our municipalities who do not bow to the edicts of Hartford on zoning and any other number of policies contemplated in this bill. Do not be tricked by the gentle terminology of the proponents of this bill or that are contemplated in this bill. It actually means economic harm to our towns and cities. So when Senator Gordon proposes this reasonable amendment in order to keep our towns and cities from being economically harmed, I say, good on him. That is reasonable. Maybe we could suggest better policies for our towns and cities that we think are better here in Hartford, but let's not rob them of access to hundreds of millions of dollars of vital funding for, among other things, clean water. I don't think that a town or city that doesn't bow to the zoning preferences of the state capital shouldn't be eligible for clean water funding, shouldn't be eligible potentially for hundreds of millions of dollars of vital state funding. But wants are unlimited. The economic wants are unlimited. The funds, the resources are limited. And so deprioritization and prioritization means that some towns and cities are going to get cut off. That's simple. Everyone knows it. This amendment will protect our towns and cities for the vital resources that they have. And so I'll be voting in favor of it enthusiastically, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do so as well.
Thank you, Senator Fazio. Will you remark further, Senator Marks?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question for the proponent of the amendment.
Thank you. Prepare yourself, Senator Gordon. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam President. On lines 475 through 478, it says nothing in this subsection shall be construed to make a municipality that does not have an approved affordable housing plan pursuant to subsection G of this section ineligible for discretionary infrastructure funding. And so my question to the good senator, proponent of this amendment, is it's covered here in the bill, and why would you think that it would not happen to those that do not have an affordable housing plan?
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
And through you, Madam President, what section are you referring to of the bill?
The same section.
I'm assuming that's section 6, those lines. So you actually raise a good point. In fact, it supports this amendment. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that on behalf of the good senator. So it's not making them ineligible. And we brought that up in the Planning and Development Committee. So they're eligible. They're just being deprioritized. There's a difference. You can be ineligible and means you have a 0 chance of getting it. So my point is they're eligible, but they're being deprioritized, so their chance is now lower than somebody else. That's a major distinction. Again, I have studied through this bill, and that's a point that's been raised already in committee, and it's a point that I appreciate the good senator making, because again, it highlights the importance of this amendment, and I thank her for doing that, because she's articulated it better than perhaps I did when I discussed this amendment. Again, they're not becoming ineligible. I never said that. They're being deprioritized. So again, their chance isn't 0, but their chance now is lower than some other municipality. A very, very important distinction, and I appreciate that it's been clarified for all of us here on this amendment. And I believe that given the discussion we've now just had, all the more reason we should want to be supporting the amendment. We don't want to have our towns that are eligible be deprioritized, and deprioritization is a penalty. There's no way around that. So again, I appreciate the question, and thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment, Senator Marks?
Thank you, Madam President. I disagree, and I encourage my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Will you remark further on the amendment, Senator Rahman?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I know my good colleague, Senator, just a few minutes ago, he mentioned TOD Massachusetts. Massachusetts, they passed a bill called MBTA TOD mandate. But Connecticut, this bill is not mandating TOD. If it's town, it's option, municipal option. If town created TOD, they will receive grant. Discretionary infrastructure funding is defined as urban action bonds, steep, main street, clean water, whatever it is nothing taking away. If they're creating and they're using TOD develop, then they will receive the fund. They can apply for the fund. If they don't create, if they don't use the TOD, then they are not going to receive anything, or they are not going to lose anything either. Nothing taking away. And it is not mandate, but Massachusetts, they passed the bill TOD mandate. Thank you, Madam President.
Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, I will open the voting machine. Mr. Clerk.
Immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment B. Again, this is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment B of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. This is Senate Amendment B of House Bill number 5002. We are voting on an amendment, not the bill. Immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment B of House Bill number 5002.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Amendment B of House Bill 5002. Total number voting 35, total voting 11, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the bill? Senator Gordon.
And good morning, Madam President. I'm going to move on, if I may, through you to the proponent of the bill, ask a question.
Please do prepare yourself, Senator Marks.
So through you, Madam President, I'm going to ask the proponent of the bill, can she please tell me what in Section 6, line 290 is Statute 4-66G referring to?
Senator Marks.
Thank you, Madam President. 1 minute, please. I might have it here. Through you, Madam President, thank you for the patience. That stands for the STEEP program, to the Senator.
Thank you, Senator Gordon.
And thank you, Madam President. And as we know, STEEP grants are very important to our communities, including perhaps to communities in each one of our Senate districts. And as we've just had a debate here, none of this is going to make municipalities ineligible, but this legislation will deprioritize some of them relative to others. That's a penalty. That's wrong. And towns do rely upon STEEP grants. Doesn't matter if they apply every year or not. There are those opportunities, and don't we want to have equity with regards to being able to apply? And that's a concern that was raised in the Planning and Development Commission, raising it here tonight, that we shouldn't be picking winners and losers in that regard. And when there's a limited amount of money for STEEP grants, then prioritizing one over another can be detrimental to a municipality that gets deprioritized through no fault of its own. That's why I've been advocating to try to have separate additional money to be of help for communities with regards to transit-oriented districts. And so that gets into my next amendment, Madam President. The clerk is in possession of LCO number 9867, and I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO 9867, Senate Amendment C.
Senator Gordon.
And thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and I seek, please, leave to summarize.
Please do summarize, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I've already provided summarization of this and why it's important that we don't deprioritize. I would, as I've done on the prior amendment that failed on a party line vote, ask that we support this amendment so we can continue to make certain that there's equitable opportunities for municipalities, wherever they may be, in our state to avail themselves of STEEP grants, which are very important. And as we know, there was just a round of STEEP grant awards given out, and I appreciate the fact, and I had already publicly thanked the governor. I'll thank him here on this fine morning again for several of my towns, Ashford, Union, Hampton, benefiting from STEEP grants. And those are towns that don't have transit-oriented districts and don't have infrastructure to be able to do that, but yet they could then become deprioritized in the future through no fault of their own. And so that would be a shame in general for any of our towns who could avail themselves of STEEP grants. So I urge adoption of the amendment. And Madam President, when the vote is taken, I ask please that it be taken by a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark on the amendment? Senator Marks.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, again, I ask my colleagues to please vote no. The prioritization of these grants is what we are giving to the towns that agree to do the new affordable housing plan so that we can get more housing excuse me, in small towns. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? Will you remark further? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment C. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment C of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. This is not the bill. We're voting on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment C of House Bill 5002. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment C. We're voting on the amendment. This is not the bill. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate.
Have all the senators voted? The machine, oops, wait, let me open that because, yep, sorry, I didn't realize that Senator Flexer had not voted. Okay. Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally, please.
Senate Amendment C of House Bill 5002, total number voting 35, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the bill? Senator Gordon.
Madam President, thank you. And when I further look into Section 6 and that line 290, we come across a reference to General Statute 4-66H, and that, I believe, gets into Main Street Investment Fund account. That's something that various municipalities also could avail themselves of. And as we've already heard, that was just recently said relative to the last amendment, that one's looking to prioritize certain types of state discretionary grants for those communities that are able to avail themselves of these provisions in this bill. But then again, as I've been saying, there are communities that can't through no fault of their own, and if one community gets prioritized, it's simple common sense understanding that our constituents know somebody gets deprioritized. That's the way it works. And so that's a concern when it comes to Main Street Investment Fund account. And so with that in mind, Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9868. I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9868, Senate Amendment D.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and please seek leave to summarize.
Please do summarize.
I don't think I really need to say much beyond what I've already said. I think it's an important issue that we're trying through these amendments to create a fair and equitable playing field and not have communities deprioritize. Again, many through no fault of their own. It's fine to prioritize if you can give additional money and you're not taking away from other communities. But in this case right now, it isn't. So that's just not fair and right. And when we talk about another state discretionary grant, Main Street Investment Fund account, again, that's something that many of our communities could benefit from. Wouldn't we want to do something to be helping our communities and the people in our community? So I urge adoption of the amendment, Madam President, and I ask that when the vote is taken, it please be taken by a roll call vote.
And we will take it by the roll. Senator Marks, would you like to remark on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam President. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? Will you remark further? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk, announce the vote, please.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment D. We are not voting on the bill. This is a vote on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment D of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment D. This is a vote on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment D of House Bill number 5002. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment D of House Bill number 5002.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally on the amendment.
Senate Amendment D of House Bill 5002. Total number voted 35, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further, Senator Gordon?
Thank you, Madam President. I look forward to remarking further. And so when I look further in Section 6, and we're talking about state discretionary grants that various municipalities could be deprioritized, which is a penalty, basically, in the real world, I notice that in there is reference to Connecticut General Statute 22A-477, and that happens to be, I believe, relative to Clean Water Fund. That's something quite important. I think a lot of communities certainly want to be attending to various environmental issues, which, as we know, are very important when we deal with land use decisions and wanting to make certain that we attend to various environmental concerns, especially when we deal with public drinking water supplies. That's extremely important, especially not just for those communities that have municipal public water systems, but for many of the communities in various parts of our state that basically people rely upon public wells. So certainly, as we know, there's been lots of efforts to want to make certain that people have access to clean water. We can all readily understand that. And the Clean Water Fund does various things, and various municipalities may want to avail themselves moving forward, and some have in the past, to be able to do various projects for upholding things like public health, especially, for example, having clean water. Hence what's in the name of the fund, Clean Water Fund. And that would be a concern if we create a unequitable system where we segregate municipalities into different groupings, ones that become prioritized, but others that become deprioritized through no fault of their own, for reasons that I've already mentioned. And that would not be good to do, especially when we talk about limited pools of money. So with that in mind, and to try to find what I believe are constructive ways to improve this bill and to further help our constituents and the towns in which they live in all of our Senate districts, Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9870. I ask, please, that the clerk call the amendment.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9870, Senate Amendment E.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and please seek leave to summarize.
Please do summarize, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I've already summarized, but to recap, again, this is an important state discretionary fund. We want to make certain that that can remain equitable in a fair playing field way for various communities. And if we want to incentivize communities through this bill, then my constructive and friendly suggestion is we create additional source of money to be of help to them and not take away from the limited pool of money, because money is finite, and we know that well when we deal with budget issues, for communities to avail themselves when they might want to apply for clean water funds via grant application. So I urge adoption of the amendment. And Madam President, I ask, please, that when a vote is taken, it be taken by a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark on the amendment, Senator Marks?
Thank you, Madam President. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the amendment.
Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment E of House Bill number 5002. Again, this is a vote on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment E. This is not the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment E of House Bill number 5002, an immediate roll call vote in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment E. This is a vote on the amendment, not the bill. This is Senate Amendment E of House Bill number 5002, an immediate roll call vote in the Senate.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk.
Senate Amendment E of House Bill 5002. Total number voted 35, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further? Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. In an effort to continue to try to be constructive relative to being of help to our municipalities, again, not wanting to penalize them, but indeed trying to find ways to partner and collaborate with them in ways we can incentivize things if communities are able to do certain things. I look further through Section 6 and I notice that there's also relative to these discretionary infrastructure funding references to Connecticut General Sections 8-13M to 8-13X. Some of that gets into financial incentive programs relative to various types of incentive housing programs. It's a number of statutes as I look through here. But those are things that some municipalities may want to avail themselves of moving forward. And again, trying to create a fair, equitable playing field. Finite amount of money, want to be fair, want to give everybody the same opportunity on the merits of what their applications are. And if we're going to want to prioritize those types of things in 8-13M to 8-13X, create additional pools of money to use as an incentive, and don't take away from other municipalities that are not able to create transit-oriented districts for the reasons I mentioned through no fault of their own. Again, don't be looking at deprioritization. Don't be looking at a penalty, which deprioritization is. Look to see what we can do a bit differently and achieve the same result. I think that would be a good way, and a good collaborative way, and a good way to extend out one's hand and say to various towns, we actually do want to work with you. We just don't say it in sound bites. We don't say it just in emails and other statements that get made, but we really want to do it. And this is one way to do that in making this bill better, I believe, in that regard. So let me just make certain I have the right LCO number here, which I believe I do here. I think so. 9871. Yes. So, Madam President, I believe the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9871.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9871, Senate Amendment F.
Senator Gordon.
Madam President, I move. Let me just get the right one here. Madam President, did I have the right one? Let me just see here. Do you have that little statement for me to read?
We have 9871
Do I?
on the board.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that correct?
Yep, correct. I just wanted to make certain I didn't give the wrong number accidentally.
Excellent.
Thank you, Madam President. So I ask that I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and I seek leave to summarize, please, Madam President.
Please continue, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, for reasons that I've mentioned, I believe this is actually a good amendment. I think this is a way that we can further collaborate and partner with municipalities and not do a penalty in the version of a deprioritization for what could be a potentially important grant opportunity if that municipality comes across that opportunity. Shouldn't that be things that we should be doing? So I will once again urge my colleagues to support this amendment and urge adoption of the amendment. And Madam President, I ask that when a vote be taken, it please be taken by a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark further on the amendment? Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk.
Immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment F. We're not voting on the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment F, House Bill number 5002. This is Senate Amendment F of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment F. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment F of House Bill number 5002. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally, please.
Senate Amendment F, House Bill 5002. Total number voting 35, total voting yea 10, total voting nay 25, absent 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further, Senator Gordon?
Thank you, Madam President. I will remark further. Well, those were opportunities to see what we can do to try to create an equitable playing field and get away from trying to pick winners and losers. And if we're going to incentivize, but don't take things away from other municipalities that, through no fault of their own, aren't in a position to create a transit-oriented district. But I think these votes speak very clearly for themselves where things stand. And I believe that also tells me that even though there's been a lot of talk about wanting to provide incentives, I think there's very much what gets sometimes termed as coercion via incentive. And I think this is one of those examples, and not the right way to be doing things. I think there's different, more friendly ways and actually more productive ways to do some things. And these amendments were ways to try to do that, but as we see, it was voted down along a party line vote, and one can make note of that at a later time. One of the other aspects of this bill that raises a concern to me is also in Section 6, A13, where it starts talking about quote-unquote realistic opportunity when you have to try to create various plans for affordable housing and want to see what you're changing of your zoning regulations to create quote-unquote realistic opportunity to try to bring about various provisions of this bill, or pertinent provisions of this bill relative to affordable housing. And I think, and I know, that this really is very broad requirement and can be used by state government in many tremendous ways that may create unintended consequences at a municipal level, or unnecessarily tag things at a municipal level that we really don't want to do. I don't think that that is needed. I think that if there's a town that really, or that we should be really looking to see via zoning regulations, letting towns sort through what they know are realistic opportunities. Not the state trying to mandate down certain things, but they can decide that without having some overseer adjudicator be making some decision to say, yes, it's a realistic opportunity that you created, or no, it isn't, and how that person's going to be making those types of decisions. And I won't go into all the details of that in the bill. Again, I've studied this bill, and I know I've heard that some others have studied this bill as well, so certainly I think one can readily pick that out to see that that is a part of the bill that's fraught with certain problems, and that's certainly a concern that I would have in this bill. I don't think it's needed in the bill. I think it's part of a heavy-handed approach in the bill, and we should be doing something more collaborative in a friendly way to be partnering with the towns who do want to seek that type of friendly collaboration. And so with that in mind, Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9872. I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9872, Senate Amendment G.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment, waive the reading, and I seek leave, please, to summarize.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I think removing this, as I've already mentioned, is important to do to better enable towns to do what they already do and not have to add an extra layer of government. We've heard earlier tonight, in fact, it was technically yesterday, that about big government. And this is one of those things about big government, getting down onto the municipal level. And as I stated earlier, there are many times when one tries at a municipal level with land use and housing affordability things, the state many times can get in the way. And this is one of the ways that it will get in the way, and that's going to add an additional burden. Why would we want to do that? Aren't we already hearing that this is the time for change and we should be doing things to improve a process? So why add something unnecessary and burdensome into a process if this is the moment for change that we're trying to improve processes? We shouldn't, as a state, be making things more complicated and burdensome. So I don't believe that this is needed. I think this can actually be harmful and can be used, again, as a way to be coercive to towns and not in an otherwise good collaborative way. So, Madam President, I urge adoption of the amendment, and I ask that when a vote be taken, it please be taken by a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark further on the amendment? Senator Marks.
Through you, Madam President, I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Thank you. Will you remark further? Will you remark further? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment G. This is not the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment G of House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment G of House Bill number 5002. Again, this is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment G. We're voting on Senate Amendment G of House Bill number 5002. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. See what I mean? Media roll call vote in the Senate. Media roll call vote in the Senate. Senate Amendment G, I'm sorry. House Bill 5002.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally, please.
Senate Amendment G of House Bill 5002. Total number vote 35, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further, Senator Gordon?
And thank you, Madam President. And one thing I just want to note as a theme, whenever I'm bringing out amendments, I'm trying to state reasons why to vote for it. It seems that many times folks are urged otherwise to vote no, no reason stated. But I'll leave it for the public to decide what they think overall of the discussion that we've been having and decision making on various amendments and what they think about the amendments moving forward that I'm trying to propose. And I look forward to further discussion and any amendments brought forward by my colleagues. I look at Section 7 of this bill, and it gets into what's been termed as the fair share types of methodologies, although I don't refer it that way. I tend to refer it as unfair share. I don't see how one really came up with those numbers. I was at the presentation by the outside consultant, again, the one that got $250,000, and they're based in Oregon, which I don't think is anywhere near Connecticut. And how various numbers have been come up with to be tagged to various towns to try to build certain numbers of affordable housing, but not really realistically looking, how can they actually do that? Do they have the public infrastructure? And we've just seen that despite attempts to try to level an equal playing field for limited number of grant monies for state discretionary grants, that there is going to be two different classes. There's going to be those who get prioritized and those who get deprioritized. So if this bill creates that type of uneven playing field, I don't see then how this quote-unquote fair share numbers, again, what I consider unfair share numbers, could be realistic opportunities for towns to try to meet if they're not given the partnership, the collaboration, and the resources from the state. And in Section 7, it goes through a bunch of different things, talking about the report that came out, an alternate approach A, in that study, and I don't need to pull up that study. We can certainly see it. Again, I've spent a lot of time studying this bill, and I spent a lot of time as well studying through the various different reports, including an updated report that came out in May, and we're still in May, with regards to making decisions relative to that. So pretty rushed timing with regards to some of the information that comes out and then having to make decisions on this bill. But I think it is unfair to towns to tag them unrealistically for things. And as we've seen earlier in our discussions, it's easy to make the towns a target. But we should be looking at them as friends and as partners. And if they're not going to be able to realistically meet some of these numbers in this alternative approach A of that study report that came out, which not surprisingly came out with numbers that seem not to be that disparate from the original bill that got changed to create that study. Gee, that's a surprise. And towns, I think, will be unfairly tagged for not meeting some of these numbers. And again, they're an easy target. And you can blame them, but there'll be no fault of their own. I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be letting the towns see what they are already doing and perhaps then better do with better state partnership to be creating housing affordability to see what we can do. And so for me, I don't see that Section 7 is helpful at all. I actually think it will be a hindrance, and it sets unrealistic markers. And what are we going to do when municipalities can't reach them? We're going to say, well, now we have to seek change again. Well, why not seek things that are meaningful now if we're looking to make certain changes? And at the same time, look at the failures of 830G and ways that my colleagues and I have been proposing good and realistic changes in 830G to move things forward for affordable housing and move things forward for that separate but more inclusive category of housing affordability for the hard-working people of Connecticut, for their families, for our seniors and retirees, and for each one of our 169 municipalities everywhere across our wonderful and great state. And with that in mind, Madam President, the clerk is in possession of LCO number 9818. I ask the clerk to please call the amendment.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 9818, Senate Amendment H.
Senator Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move adoption of the amendment and waive the reading and seek leave to summarize, please.
Please do summarize.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I've made already comments summarizing this and why I think this is important to strike that section and seek what I think are better ways to try to achieve the intent and the goals that I know will put various towns on different tracks because various towns are different from each other to see what they can do than just artificially seeking a number. One could create 100 quote-unquote affordable housing units, but they may not really match what is needed in that community, and perhaps 50 of better matched affordable housing opportunities can actually really provide a good opportunity than just purely looking at a number. And numbers just in vacuum doesn't really tell a story and doesn't really drive at what our goals and intents. It's at the grassroots real world level. So I urge adoption of the amendment. And Madam President, when the vote is taken, I ask that it be taken by a roll call, please.
We will have a roll call vote. Will you remark on the amendment, Senator Marks?
Through you, Madam President, I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, the machine is open. Mr. Clerk, please announce
Immediate
the
roll
vote.
call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment H. We're voting on Senate Amendment H. This is not the bill. House Bill number 5002. We're voting on Senate Amendment H. This is not the bill. We are voting on an amendment to House Bill number 5002, an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment H. This is a vote on Senate Amendment H. We are voting on an amendment. Senate Amendment H of House Bill number 5002. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment H of House Bill number 5002. This is not the bill. This is Senate Amendment H.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally.
Senate Amendment H of House Bill 5002. Total number voting 35, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Senator Gordon.
Madam President, thank you. Again, not a surprise. It certainly is disappointing, but not a surprise to see another common sense amendment fail on a party line vote without any actual explanation provided for why people were urged to vote no, despite what I think were good comments and arguments for them to actually vote yes. In some of my additional comments relative to this bill is, I understand the goal and the intent of the bill. I have concerns about some of the processes and logistics that this bill is going to be undertaking. I'm concerned when I hear comments and I repeatedly see various municipalities, wherever they may be in the state, used as punching bags at times for saying that their zoning is standing in the way. I've not seen evidence of that, and I dare say I would challenge anyone who feels that that's the case, come out to any one of my 13 towns. Well, actually 12, because Eastford doesn't really have its own zoning specifically, but come out to my towns, and I'm happy to have you meet with the folks that do this work at the grassroots level. I've heard that sometimes some proponents of the bill have gone out. I've not actually been able to verify that, however. But nevertheless, I urge people to get out to see how this stuff is actually done. I know it because I've lived it for 16 years. But nevertheless, before passing laws that may sound good and with what may be good intentions, and I think trying to provide more opportunities for housing affordability is something we all agree on in general terms. See what you're going to do with a law, if this becomes a law, to try to get a meaningful result, minimize unintended consequences. And I think we're going to be having to come back because we're going to be hearing when this doesn't fully work the way that I think the proponents think on paper it's going to work. That not only will we hear more blame on our towns, but then we're going to hear, well, we need to make further changes. This is an opportunity to have made further changes, to try to make the bill better, to achieve things that we think that we can achieve. What a missed opportunity that was. But again, the votes are the way the votes are on these amendments, and they're part of the public record now. But as I mentioned earlier when I started my comments, there are opportunities about affordability overall in a state that has a high cost of living, high energy costs, lots of tax burdens and regulatory things on job-creating businesses, and we should overall be really seriously looking at all of those different things. I know my Republican colleagues and I have been proposing time after time after time, including here tonight, common sense, constructive proposals to do just that for our constituents and the people of Connecticut. I won't stop fighting that fight, and I welcome anybody who wishes to join. I think there's lots of opportunities to do that and lots of credit to go around and abound to try to do these things. But again, this bill before us, I believe, has serious flaws in it and serious concerns. And for those reasons, and not what the goals and the intents are of the bill, I'm going to be voting no on it. And when I vote no, I'm going to continue to find opportunities with people to try to see what we can do to take further good steps forward, and not just vote no and say I'm done, but to continue to see what we can do to move the ball forward for the people of Connecticut. And I look forward to those opportunities, and anyone who wants to join my colleagues and I are more than welcome to. And I can tell you, when I speak with my constituents in my part of the state, they understand where I'm coming from, and they understand that type of approach because they see it in their towns relative to decisions that are made with them and for them in the towns. And I'll leave with this message, which again is extremely important to know whenever we make decisions, especially decisions on bills like this, which is the people of Connecticut know best what is best for the communities in which they live. Thank you, Madam President.